Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The magical world of Harry Potter fascinates, amazes, inspires, but also raises quite a few questions. Despite J.K. Rowling's brilliance, even she left some logical inconsistencies that become more and more noticeable with time. Some details feel like they were added in retrospect, while others outright ignore the internal logic of the magical universe. Today, we'll explore the biggest plot holes that remain unanswered to this day. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Why didn't James and Lily become each other's secret keepers? The Fidelius charm is one of the most powerful spells of protection, concealment, and trust. When the threat of Voldemort became real, Dumbledore advised the Potters to hide under the protection of this spell. Peter Pettigrew became their secret keeper, and we all know how that turned out. But here's the main question. Why didn't James and Lily become secret keepers for each other? That would have been the most logical choice. After all, the secret keeper must willingly reveal the secret, and who better than loving spouses to keep each other's location hidden? It would have removed the need to involve a third party entirely. There's no explanation in the books. Was it a mistake, an oversight, or something deeper? Number 2. Timeline issues. At Hogwarts, the school year always begins on September 2nd, but take a closer look. The books claim it's always a Monday. However, in the real 1991 calendar, September 2nd did fall on a Monday, but only that year. After that, not anymore. It's as if Hogwarts exists in a frozen timeline. Another example, Harry's birthday. In the Philosopher's Stone, he celebrates it on what should be a Tuesday, but July 31st, 1991 was a Wednesday. Little things like this give the impression of a magical calendar, where days of the week are molded to fit the plot rather than logic. Number 3. Did the professors forget about Alohomora? When Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban, Hogwarts implemented unprecedented security measures, locked doors, guards, patrols. It all seemed well planned. But there's one problem. The spell Alohomora can open almost any door, and even first-year Hermione knew it. Are we to believe that adult wizards, including Dumbledore and McGonagall, simply forgot about it? Or did they hope that Sirius, one of the most clever and dangerous wizards of his time, would conveniently not remember such a basic spell? A strange lapse in logic. Number 4. The Troll and the Slytherin Students, possibly the most absurd blunder in the series. In the first book, during Halloween, a mountain troll infiltrates the castle. The professors decide to send all students back to their common rooms for safety. Sounds reasonable, if not for one detail. The Slytherin common room is in the dungeons. That is exactly where the troll was. Did the professors panic and forget the castle layout? Or was it an author's oversight? Some fans have jokingly suggested Dumbledore was secretly hoping the troll would clear out a few Slytherins, but that theory seems more like dark satire than canon logic. Number 5. Why was Ron allowed to use a broken wand? After crashing the flying Ford Anglia, Ron's wand split. This wasn't just a broken tool, it was a ticking magical hazard. Remember, Gilderoy Lockhart tried to use it and ended up erasing his own memory. Why didn't any professors intervene? Why didn't the Weasleys insist on replacing it? A student wielding a malfunctioning wand is like someone walking around school with a live, magical grenade. And this went on all year without consequence. Ron survived by sheer luck, and his education certainly didn't benefit. Number 6. The cost of wands. 7 galleons. That's what Ollivander charges for a wand. Affordable? Sure. Logical? Not really. The core materials of wands aren't ordinary wood. They're rare magical substances, phoenix feathers, unicorn hair, dragon heartstrings. At one point, Professor Slughorn even remarks that unicorn hair costs more than the wand itself. So how does Ollivander stay in business? Does he run at a loss? And why doesn't the Ministry regulate such an essential market of magical artifacts? Number 7. Why didn't Dumbledore use the Time Turner against Voldemort? In Prisoner of Azkaban, Dumbledore gives Hermione a time turner. With it, she and Harry bend time itself. They rescue Buckbeak. They save Sirius Black from a fate worse than death. You must not be seen, Dumbledore warns, but he clearly trusts the tool. It works. It changes history, and yet he never uses it again. Not to warn James and Lily, not to stop Barty Crouch Jr., not to stop Tom Riddle before he became Voldemort. One of the most powerful magical devices is simply shelved. Dumbledore was willing to risk time travel to save 2 lives, but when an entire war breaks out, he does nothing. The Ministry kept a stock of time turners. They were used for academic scheduling, not for war, not for peace, not even for justice. Later, Rowling writes they were all destroyed during the battle at the Department of Mysteries. Convenient, but it doesn't explain why no one thought to use them earlier. If time travel could rewrite a single night, why not an entire war? Dumbledore saw the future burning. He had the key to the past, and he left it locked. Number 8. How did the Weasley twins not notice Peter Pettigrew on the Marauder's map? Fred and George Weasley had the Marauder's map for years. They knew every corner of Hogwarts, every shortcut, every secret passage. They watched professors roam the corridors. They probably even spied on Filch. Yet somehow they never noticed the name Peter Pettigrew following Ron around the castle, not once, not even when they saw 2 names, Ron Weasley and a man believed dead for over a decade, walking side by side on the same tiny dot. Harry saw it immediately. "Peter Pettigrew?" he whispered. "But he's dead." The map doesn't lie. It shows Animagi. It showed Barty Crouch Jr. under Polyjuice. It even displayed ghosts and house elves. So how did 2 of the most mischievous and observant students at Hogwarts never stop to ask, who the hell is Peter? There's only one answer. Either the twins were incredibly uncurious, or the story chose to look away until the twist was ready. And that silence became a plot hole too big for the map to hide. Number 9. Why did no one help Harry during the Triwizard tournament? Harry never asked to compete. His name was forced into the Goblet of Fire, and yet the moment it came out glowing, everyone turned their backs. Dumbledore didn't pull him aside. McGonagall didn't argue. Even Hagrid, who loved him like a son, kept quiet. The rules, they said, were binding, but were they really? In the book, Dumbledore admits, "I'm afraid no champion can back out." But that only explained the participation, not the silence. Help wasn't forbidden. The other champions had it. Cedric got tips from Flitwick. Fleur learned from Madame Maxime. Crumb from Karkaroff. But Harry? He got Rita Skeeter's gossip and Moody's cryptic hints from a man who wasn't even really Moody. The only real advice came from Cedric when he whispered, "Take a bath." That was it. A boy was being thrown against dragons and merfolk, and the people who trained him to levitate feathers suddenly had nothing to say. What's worse is that Dumbledore knew something was wrong. He suspected dark magic. He feared manipulation, yet he allowed Harry to march into every task alone. Not a shield charm, not a single rehearsal, just hope. It feels less like preparation and more like neglect. A test of character, maybe. But in a game where losing meant death, the stakes were too high for silence. And Dumbledore, the man who always had a plan, stayed in the shadows. Number 10. Why don't wizards use Muggle technology? Arthur Weasley asked, wide-eyed, "What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?" And the wizarding world laughed. But behind the joke is a larger issue. Wizards know almost nothing about Muggle technology. They live in secret but reject everything Muggles invent. When Sirius needed to speak to Harry, he risked using a fireplace in Umbridge's office. Why not a phone? It would have taken seconds, not sorcery. But instead they whisper through flames and send slow owls across battlefields. Imagine if the Order of the Phoenix had access to email. Voldemort moved fast, messages had to be faster, but wizards relied on birds, fireplaces, and Patronus messengers. Not one member of the Order suggested something as simple as a walkie-talkie. Even when Harry, Ron, and Hermione were on the run, their communication depended on luck. A basic GPS tracker would have been more reliable than a stolen radio and a tent, but the magical world is frozen in time, brilliant in spellwork, blind to science. The statute of secrecy may explain some of it, but pride explains more. Wizards think they're above electricity, yet they still write letters by hand, carry coins in sacks, and walk miles when cars exist. Molly Weasley cooks by wand when an oven would do. Mr. Weasley adores Muggle inventions, but no one listens to him. Magic replaces need, but not efficiency. In the end, it isn't just a cultural divide, it's a refusal to evolve. And that choice makes the wizarding world weaker, not wiser. Number 11. Why weren't memories used to prove the innocence of the falsely accused? The pensieve is one of the most powerful magical tools in the wizarding world. It shows not just memories, but truth, as remembered and lived. Dumbledore used it to walk through Tom Riddle's past. Harry watched trials, murders, betrayals, all preserved like living history. And yet, for reasons never explained, the Ministry of Magic never used it to defend the innocent. Not once, not even when it mattered most. Take Sirius Black. He was thrown into Azkaban without a trial. No hearing, no questioning, just the word of 12 frightened witnesses and the ruins of a street. But memories existed. Peter Pettigrew faked his own death. Cornelius Fudge even saw Pettigrew alive years later and still refused to reconsider. Had anyone summoned Remus Lupin, Dumbledore, or even used Sirius's own memories in a pensieve, the truth could have been revealed. But the system never asked for truth, just punishment. I did my waiting, 12 years of it in Azkaban. Sirius's rage wasn't just about lost time. It was about justice that never bothered to look. Why didn't anyone ask for the truth? When Barty Crouch Jr. was revealed, when Stan Shunpike was arrested, when Hagrid was blamed for opening the Chamber of Secrets, no one demanded a memory. The wizarding legal system trusted tabloids and whispers more than magical fact. The pensieve sat unused, gathering dust while lives crumbled. Truth was never the goal, control was. Number 12. Why didn't Hermione place magical protection on her parents? Hermione stood in the living room, wand raised, tears in her eyes. Her parents smiled, unaware they were about to forget their only child. In Deathly Hallows, she whispers a charm that rewrites their memories and identities. She sends them to Australia, alone, with no trace of the daughter they once had. She later tells Harry, "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins." It's heartbreaking, it's also strange. Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, chose erasure over protection. She knew of powerful magic, charms like the Fidelius that could hide an entire house from Voldemort himself. The Weasleys used such spells to shield their home. 12. Grimmauld Place remained invisible for years. Why didn't Hermione use those same charms on her parents' house? She could have hidden them, surrounded the place with protective enchantments, even kept in contact. But instead, she chose to vanish from their lives completely. Not because she had no options, but because the story needed a clean break. It becomes even more puzzling when you consider that she didn't replicate this level of caution with Harry or Ron. She camped with them in the open, in forests, with only basic enchantments for cover. She risked exposure daily. Why not protect herself with the same care she used for her parents? Or better yet, teach the Order of the Phoenix to cast such memory-altering spells or complex enchantments. No one else in the Resistance took the same precautions. Either she had unique knowledge and kept it to herself, or the logic collapsed under the weight of emotion. Hermione's choice is often framed as a tragic sacrifice, and in part it was, but it also feels like a narrative shortcut. There was no scene where she tried other spells and failed, no discussion of consequences or alternatives. She just did it, and then moved on. In a world filled with magical protections, the idea that memory wiping was the only answer rings hollow. A witch who could brew Polyjuice Potion at 13 surely knew more than one way to keep her parents safe. Number 13. Why was Percy Weasley accepted back into the family so easily? Percy Weasley turned his back on his family at the worst possible moment. In Order of the Phoenix, he cut ties with Arthur and Molly, sided with the Ministry, and even went so far as to call his own parents traitors. He sent Ron a cold letter warning him to distance himself from Harry and Dumbledore. The divide wasn't quiet. It was bitter, public, and painful. "What I say to you, Ronald," Percy wrote, "is that you should seize the opportunity to make something of yourself," implying that his family was holding him back. That wasn't a disagreement. That was betrayal. But then came Deathly Hallows. Percy shows up at the Battle of Hogwarts unannounced, slips back into the fold with nothing but a quick joke. "Hello, Minister," bellowed Percy, hugging Scrimgeour. "Did I mention I'm resigning?" And just like that, he's back. No scene with Molly. No reckoning with Arthur. No forgiveness from Fred. Instead, Fred dies in front of Percy moments later, and the chance for a proper reconciliation vanishes. The story lets Percy rejoin the family without truly facing what he did. It feels empty. The Weasleys, who sacrificed and struggled for each other, deserved more than a quiet return from the son who chose pride over blood. Molly, who wept over her children's safety, never gets to speak her heart to him. Arthur, humiliated at work because of Percy's cold loyalty to the Ministry, doesn't even get a conversation. And Fred, whose last words to Percy are a laugh, dies before we know if he ever forgave his brother. The emotional weight is dropped just when it matters most. Percy's return should have been powerful. A fight, a tearful apology, a slap from his mother, or a breakdown in the middle of the battle. Instead, it's brushed aside, a footnote in the chaos. In a story where family bonds are everything, Percy's betrayal and forgiveness are handled with strange silence. The reader is left wondering, after all that, did Percy really earn his place beside them again? Number 14. Why doesn't the Ministry of Magic use magical lie detectors? The Ministry of Magic, with all its elaborate bureaucracy, towering offices, and layers of departments, has always presented itself as the ultimate authority in the wizarding world. Yet when one begins to peel back the surface, a disquieting pattern emerges time and time again. The Ministry has failed to employ the very magical tools at its disposal that could have ensured justice, transparency, and truth. The most jarring absence is that of any reliable magical equivalent to a lie detector, despite the fact that the magical world possesses several potent means of revealing the truth. Veritaserum, the fabled potion of truth, is not a myth or experimental brew. Its effects are consistently acknowledged in the wizarding world. When Snape mentions it in the Goblet of Fire, he speaks not of something speculative, but of a known, accessible potion. 3 drops of this, and even you-know-who would spill his darkest secrets. And yet, this powerful tool is strangely absent from Ministry interrogations. If the Ministry were truly committed to justice, why did they not simply administer Veritaserum to Sirius Black before locking him away in Azkaban for 12 years without a trial? Sirius's case stands as a chilling testament to how deeply the system is broken. Accused of betraying James and Lily Potter and murdering 13 Muggles with a single curse, Sirius was not given the chance to defend himself. No Veritaserum, no review of his memories in a pensive, no attempt to check the facts beyond the testimonies of those too eager to see someone punished. The Ministry did not act in the pursuit of justice. It acted out of fear and public pressure, using Sirius as a scapegoat to reassure the population that the war was over and someone had paid the price. The very tools that could have exonerated him, tools available even to a third-year student like Hermione Granger, who brewed polyjuice potion in a bathroom, were ignored. In Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore uses a pensieve to store and review memories, demonstrating its practical value in discerning truth. He trusts it so much that he brings it to Harry's occlumency lessons, showing Snape's own memories in liquid silver strands. And yet, the Ministry, with all its resources, chooses to base verdicts on biased testimonies and political convenience. Stan Shunpike's arrest during the height of Voldemort's return illustrates this tragic tendency. The conductor of the night bus, a man more known for his big mouth than any dark associations, is thrown into Azkaban for allegedly supporting the Death Eaters. Harry, in Half-Blood Prince, is appalled by this injustice, noting, "Stan Shunpike never hurt a fly." Here again, there is no indication of any veritaserum, no pensive consultation, no attempt at legilimency. Stan is guilty only of being an easy target. The use of magical truth-revealing methods could have also spared Rubeus Hagrid from his own share of injustice. In Chamber of Secrets, Hagrid is sent to Azkaban when the chamber is reopened. Cornelius Fudge, then Minister for Magic, declares the action precautionary. But Hagrid had been expelled decades earlier over similar accusations. Why didn't the Ministry review his memories from that time? The pensieve could have revealed the presence of Tom Riddle and the truth about the events leading to Myrtle's death. Instead, Hagrid's half-giant status and the old suspicions were enough to condemn him once more. Even Igor Karkaroff, a former Death Eater turned informant, faced skepticism and institutional bias during his testimony. While he did provide valuable names to avoid Azkaban, the proceedings of his trial, viewed by Harry through Dumbledore's pensieve, show that his claims were met with distrust and scorn. The Wizengamot appeared more interested in projecting severity than verifying information. Again, no veritaserum was used even when Karkaroff's life was on the line. The Ministry's stance seems less about truth and more about appearances. This deliberate avoidance of magical lie detection tools suggests a deeper, more insidious motive. Could it be that the Ministry prefers ambiguity? A clear truth removes the flexibility of blame. In a world where public opinion sways policy, it's far easier to pin guilt on convenient figures than to expose inconvenient facts. In the case of Barty Crouch Jr., who was smuggled out of Azkaban by his parents and used polyjuice potion to impersonate Mad-Eye Moody, the Ministry spent an entire year oblivious. Once again, a simple use of veritaserum or even a magical scan for polyjuice traces would have revealed the truth, but none was employed. Even during Harry's own disciplinary hearing in Order of the Phoenix, the system seems set up to suppress rather than discover truth. Amelia Bones, who presides over the trial, is notably surprised by Harry's mastery of the Patronus charm at such a young age, yet the fact remains that Harry is brought before a full panel of the Wizengamot for casting a defensive charm in a life-threatening situation. No one seeks his memories, no one offers veritaserum. The aim is clearly not justice, but intimidation and control. The case of Marietta Edgecombe further illustrates this resistance to magical means of determining truth. When she betrays Dumbledore's army, Hermione's spell reveals the word sneak across her face. Enchanted punishment, not institutional process. Had the Ministry truly wanted to understand what happened in the Room of Requirement, they could have reviewed Marietta's memories. Instead, her silence and Umbridge's influence controlled the narrative. So why does Hermione, as a first-year student, show more initiative in verifying truth than the entirety of the Ministry? When investigating the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione consults books, asks questions, and uses logic and observation. When confronting Rita Skeeter's unregistered animagus form, she uses magical observation, deduction, and legal knowledge. And yet, fully trained adult wizards in the Ministry consistently fail to use even the most basic tools at their disposal. Number 15. Why didn't the Marauders realize Peter had betrayed them if they were animagi? James Potter once darted through the shadowy forest in his stag form, elegant and swift, a blur against the moonlight. Beside him ran Sirius Black, the black dog Padfoot, his every movement soaked in a wild, chaotic grace. Behind them trotted a small rat, Peter Pettigrew, his animagus form scuttling through leaves and dirt, tail twitching. At a glance, they were inseparable, brothers in all but blood. But somewhere in those last tragic months, the bond fractured in silence, and none of the so-called marauders, noticed the poison growing in their circle. It is baffling, in retrospect. The marauders were no ordinary school friends. They were accomplished rule-breakers, pranksters, secret-keepers, and illegal animagi. Their entire friendship had been built around their shared ability to hide, to transform, to observe, unnoticed. They had spent years sneaking through Hogwarts grounds under the nose of Albus Dumbledore himself. The fact that they didn't use these very skills to test Peter's loyalty when Voldemort's threat loomed highest defies reason. At a time when everyone was suspect, when betrayal meant death, they left their weakest link unwatched. Sirius Black in particular had always carried a streak of suspicion. The books tell us that he knew that someone was leaking information from the Order of the Phoenix. The spy, he had called it, again and again. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius tells Harry, "I thought it was Remus. I thought Lupin was the spy." But even that shows he was thinking. He knew there was a traitor. So why didn't he follow Peter? Why didn't he, even once, become Padfoot and slink through the streets behind the rat, watch where he went, who he met, what he whispered? The painful answer may lie in arrogance. James and Sirius, above all, believed themselves too clever to be fooled. They had outsmarted teachers, prefects, even the most complex enchantments Hogwarts offered. When Sirius made the fatal decision to switch the secret keeper from himself to Peter, he thought it a brilliant deception. "I convinced James to use Pettigrew," he told Harry, "because I thought it was the perfect plan, a bluff." He believed Voldemort would come for him, not suspect Peter. In that cleverness, in that twist of pride, he sowed the seeds of disaster. Peter was always underestimated. In the Marauder hierarchy, he was the follower, the sidekick, the tag-along. The books describe him as having a pointed nose and watery eyes, and he is often mentioned trailing behind James and Sirius, not beside them. They saw him as harmless, and that blindness may have extended beyond ego. It may have been genuine emotional denial. They couldn't imagine that Peter, the boy who once gazed up at James in admiration, who squealed at Sirius's jokes, who idolized them both, could ever wish them harm. But they had the tools to know. James could have followed him as prongs, his great antlers catching the moonlight as he lingered near Peter's home. Sirius could have circled a building, nose to the ground, sniffing out the stench of fear or deception. Even Remus Lupin, though not an animagus, could have offered his sharp intelligence to deduce inconsistencies. But they didn't. Perhaps they were too exhausted, too emotionally battered by the war to look inward. Or perhaps they were simply afraid to confront the idea that one of their own had turned. There is a moment in the books that burns with hindsight. When Sirius is imprisoned in Azkaban, he tells Harry, "I did not kill your father. I would have died before I betrayed them." And yet he had lived to be tricked by his friend, lived to see the result of his choice to trust the wrong marauder. That pain, that regret never left him, and it speaks to the unspoken truth. He could have known, he could have watched Peter. He chose not to. In the Deathly Hallows, when Harry confronts the truth of the secret keeper switch, the depth of the marauder's misjudgment becomes undeniable. James and Lily trusted Peter so deeply that they went into hiding based on his word. Dumbledore, who likely had suspicions of his own, didn't interfere. The whole Order accepted it, and yet the marauders had more information than anyone. They had access to Peter's every move. Why didn't they use it? One chilling possibility is that Peter was simply better at hiding than they ever imagined. As a rat, He could vanish into shadows, slip beneath doors, scurry through dark alleys where even Padfoot couldn't follow. The irony is painful. The very thing that made the Marauders powerful, their transformations, also gave Peter the perfect cover. While Sirius and James were bold, flashy animals, impossible to miss, Peter's rat form was small, invisible, forgettable. He could meet a Death Eater in broad daylight and slip away down a drain. But there were other signs. When the Potters were murdered and Peter staged his dramatic escape by slicing off his own finger and vanishing into the sewers, Sirius knew instantly. He didn't hesitate. He laughed, howled with rage and despair, because in that moment all the pieces aligned. But by then it was too late. He had failed to act when it mattered. The months leading up to the murders had offered countless chances, nights when Sirius could have followed Peter instead of pacing Grimmauld Place, days when he could have asked Remus to spy on their friend, but no one did. There is also the strange matter of Remus Lupin. During the First Wizarding War, he was more isolated than the rest. The Order trusted him, but James and Sirius had doubts, born of his lycanthropy and the rising paranoia. "I thought he might be the spy," Sirius says. That suspicion could have been redirected. If only once the three had discussed their fears openly, if only they had joined forces not in revelry, but in grim vigilance, the truth might have surfaced. Instead, suspicion bred silence, and silence let the traitor breathe. Number 16. Why did Hermione trust Rita Skeeter? Hermione Granger was rarely impulsive. She was the student who read Hogwarts: A History before stepping foot on the castle grounds, who brewed Polyjuice Potion in second year, who took extra subjects with the help of a time-turner. Her choices were usually grounded in logic and careful strategy. Yet in Order of the Phoenix, she does something jarring. She allies herself with the very woman who once tried to destroy her reputation, Rita Skeeter. The same Skeeter who called Hermione a Scarlet Woman in Witch Weekly accused her of toying with both Victor Crumb and Harry Potter, and who published grotesque lies about Hagrid's parentage and Harry's sanity. Why then would Hermione, who so valued truth and decency, decide to collaborate with this manipulative gossip-monger? The answer is tangled in the desperation of the time. The wizarding world was sinking into denial. The Ministry of Magic, headed by Cornelius Fudge, flatly refused to acknowledge the return of Lord Voldemort, fearing public panic and the collapse of their authority. Daily Prophet articles painted Harry as unstable, even dangerous. Dumbledore had been stripped of most of his titles and dismissed from the Wizengamot. The truth had become treason. In this context, Hermione knew that conventional channels, ministry offices, official statements, would smother the message before it was heard. She needed someone who could penetrate the fog of propaganda. Ironically, Rita Skeeter, a master manipulator of public perception, was her only hope. It is crucial to understand that Hermione didn't just trust Skeeter, she controlled her. This wasn't a partnership born of mutual respect, but of blackmail. In Goblet of Fire, Hermione discovered Rita's animagus secret. She could turn into a beetle, unregistered, and had been eavesdropping on private conversations throughout the Triwizard tournament. Hermione caught her in a jar and kept her imprisoned for a time. When Skeeter published nothing over the summer, Hermione hinted, "I've told her I'll let her out when I'm sure she's learned her lesson." This knowledge gave Hermione leverage, the power to dictate terms without risking distortion. Still, blackmailing someone into writing the truth is a precarious move. Hermione had to balance two conflicting forces, the urgency of delivering Harry's story and the risk of collaborating with a known liar. The danger wasn't just that Skeeter might twist the facts, it was that any association with her could taint the credibility of the piece. But Hermione's calculation went beyond risk management. It was about impact. Luna Lovegood, with all her sincerity and openness, could not provide the same reach or influence. Her father's paper, The Quibbler, was ridiculed as a conspiracy tabloid. Hermione knew that irony would serve them best. Let the most infamous gossip columnist publish the most important truth of the year. There's a deeper irony at play. Rita Skeeter was the very embodiment of everything Hermione hated about the wizarding media: sensationalism, distortion, cruelty for entertainment's sake. And yet, in this moment, Hermione turned the weapon back on itself. She did not merely use Skeeter, she tamed her. When the article came out, Skeeter's usual venom was absent. The tone was measured, factual, even sympathetic. It was a powerful narrative about trauma and courage. The article began, "Harry Potter, 15, the only person known to have survived the killing curse, spoke to the Quibbler yesterday about the return of he who must not be named." This was Rita's pen, but not her voice. Hermione's decision reveals a seldom-seen quality in her character: political pragmatism. She understood that righteousness, while noble, was not always effective. Dumbledore himself had often chosen the indirect path, delaying explanations, withholding information for a greater cause. In this, Hermione mirrored her mentor. She did not write the article herself because her voice lacked the audience. She did not give it to Luna because it would be dismissed as fantasy. She chose the one person whose words could stir outrage, but this time used them to spread clarity. The brilliance of Hermione's maneuver lies in its subversion. The wizarding world was a place where influence often mattered more than truth. Fudge controlled the Daily Prophet. Umbridge policed the corridors of Hogwarts. Fear dictated belief. In this atmosphere, Hermione staged a literary coup. She smuggled truth in under the cover of fiction. By placing Harry's account in The Quibbler, a magazine known for its eccentricities, she paradoxically made it more appealing to those who distrusted the official line. What better way to rebel against the establishment than to read the publication it mocked? And it worked. Students whispered about the article in corridors. Teachers pretended not to know. "You're being rather modest, Potter," McGonagall said in class, a rare smile betraying her approval. The article pierced through the wall of silence. The very medium that was supposed to trivialize it, the Quibbler, made it go viral, so to speak. Copies were passed around, read aloud in common rooms, even referenced during detentions. Skeeter's name was on it, but Hermione's strategy pulsed beneath the surface. One must not underestimate the emotional toll this decision took on Hermione. She detested Rita. In Goblet of Fire, she had passionately fought to protect Hagrid and herself from Skeeter's slander. Now, in a cruel twist of fate, she was forced to rely on the same pen that once painted her as a manipulative temptress. It was a bitter pill, but Hermione, more than any other student, understood the stakes. Voldemort was back. Cedric Diggory was dead. Denial would only buy time for the Dark Lord to grow stronger. She swallowed her pride because the cost of silence was greater. Another telling detail is how Hermione framed the entire operation. She didn't present it as an alliance. She made it clear to Harry and others that Skeeter was writing under duress. She retained the jar. The article would go through her approval. Every word, every phrasing was subject to her scrutiny. It was not trust. It was a tightly controlled transaction. Hermione had transformed from a rule-abiding prefect to a behind-the-scenes strategist, willing to operate in grey areas for the greater good. Number 17, why can't horcruxes simply be destroyed with the Avada Kedavra curse? Of all the questions that bubble beneath the surface of Harry Potter's dark and magical odyssey, few are as curiously persistent as this. Why didn't anyone use Avada Kedavra to destroy a horcrux? The killing curse, feared and revered across the wizarding world, obliterates life in an instant. It strikes without warning, without resistance, with no chance of survival. One would imagine that such a force, a spell so absolute it leaves no wound, only silence, would be capable of destroying anything, even an object imbued with fractured soul. And yet, across all 7 books, particularly the final one, this spell is curiously absent from the list of horcrux-destroying strategies. The killing curse is not only a spell of death, It is a symbol of irreversible finality. When Lord Voldemort used it on Harry's parents, it left James lifeless on the staircase and Lily crumpled in the nursery. When he aimed it at baby Harry, the curse famously rebounded, splitting Voldemort's soul in the process and unwittingly creating another horcrux. And years later, when Bellatrix Lestrange aimed it at a house elf, even he, a creature steeped in ancient magics, crumbled. Its power is indisputable. Yet when Harry, Hermione, and Ron began their desperate quest to destroy the pieces of Voldemort's soul, they didn't even consider this spell. Instead, they searched for the sword of Gryffindor. They broke into Gringotts, risked death at Malfoy Manor, and returned to the Chamber of Secrets to harvest basilisk fangs. They carried a fragment of a soul around in Ron's rucksack, while it whispered madness into their ears because they couldn't destroy it without a specific kind of magical weapon. This wasn't due to ignorance. Dumbledore, who left Harry with the vital clues, was among the most brilliant wizards of all time. He knew the killing curse. He had dueled dark wizards, defeated Grindelwald, and mastered wand lore. And yet he never once suggested using the spell to destroy a horcrux. Why? The answer, in part, lies in what a horcrux actually is. As Slughorn explained, well, you split your soul, you see, and hide part of it in an object. By doing so, you are protected, should your body be destroyed. A horcrux is not simply enchanted. It is desecrated. A piece of human soul torn by murder and sealed into something physical. Its very existence is an insult to the natural order. It resists death. The killing curse, despite its power, is designed to separate soul from body. But in a horcrux, the soul is already severed. There is no body to separate. The object itself becomes a fortress. When Harry stabbed Tom Riddle's diary with a basilisk fang in Chamber of Secrets, the destruction was total. The black ink burst from its pages like blood. The pages shriveled and screamed. A moment later, the phantom version of Riddle was gone, evaporated like smoke. It wasn't the stabbing that mattered. It was the venom. Basilisk venom is among the rare substances capable of destroying the soul beyond magical repair. It corrodes not just flesh or fabric, but magic itself. The curse may kill a person, but it cannot reach into an object and unmake a soul fragment. That requires something that cuts deeper than death. In Deathly Hallows, when Ron destroys the locket, Rowling paints the moment with near mythical gravitas. The locket screams, pours out visions, and tries to manipulate his mind, not to protect the metal, but to protect the soul fragment within. Ron plunges the sword of Gryffindor into the locket, and it splits with a final scream, like a living creature giving up its last breath. The sword worked because it had absorbed basilisk venom. It carried the curse-breaker in its steel. It had properties tuned specifically to counter dark enchantments. The killing curse might have bounced off. Consider also the nature of the spell itself. Avada Kedavra does not destroy matter, it kills. It doesn't shatter cups, melt lockets, or corrode diadems. It leaves corpses intact. If it were used on an inanimate object, it might do nothing at all. When Bellatrix cast it in the Department of Mysteries, her spell blasted through the air, but it didn't disintegrate the archway or collapse walls. Magic has rules, and this curse was never designed to act on soulless things. Voldemort may have broken that rule by putting soul into objects, but that doesn't mean the spell's nature changed. In Half-Blood Prince, when Dumbledore retrieves the fake horcrux from the cave, he is already gravely weakened by the ring's curse. That ring, once worn by Marvolo Gaunt, was cursed to kill anyone who dared meddle with it. Dumbledore barely had hours to live when Snape intervened with his skills in dark magic containment. But before that, Dumbledore tried to destroy the ring with the sword of Gryffindor. That's what worked. He didn't try Avada Kedavra. He knew that the ring's magical protections would shrug off a curse designed to kill the living. There is also the matter of will. The killing curse is not just spoken, it is fueled. It requires intent, pure, focused, murderous will. Harry tries to use it in Deathly Hallows during his confrontation with the Carrows, but he cannot summon the necessary fury. "You have to mean it," as Moody once said, but how do you direct such will at an object? How do you summon lethal intent at a piece of jewelry or an ancient goblet? There's no life to target, no pulse to hate. Without that direction, the spell would fizzle like water on stone. Another layer of complexity arises with magical resistance. Horcruxes are heavily protected. The cup in the Lestrange vault, for instance, burned to the touch and multiplied if disturbed. The diadem of Ravenclaw, hidden in the Room of Requirement, whispered poison into minds. These aren't normal artifacts. They are bolstered by Voldemort's paranoia. If a spell of such raw finality as Avada Kedavra could unmake a Horcrux, Voldemort would have never created them in physical form. He would have bound them to wind or fire, or worse, to people. He chose physical vessels because he knew they were, paradoxically, harder to destroy. Magic in the wizarding world is symbolic. Its rules bend around intent, ritual, emotion, and tradition. The act of destroying a Horcrux requires more than force. It requires something antithetical to dark magic, something pure, ancient, or inherently deadly to the soul. The basilisk, a creature of death itself, offered venom that burned through the very fabric of magical protection. The sword, soaked in that venom, became a crucible of cleansing fire. These tools aren't just convenient, they are narratively and magically essential. It is also worth noting that Harry himself became a living Horcrux, Voldemort's accidental anchor. When he was struck by the killing curse in the Forbidden Forest, the spell did destroy the soul fragment inside him, not Harry's body. That was a rare convergence of intent and magic. Voldemort wanted to kill Harry, but he was unwittingly targeting a part of himself. The Elder Wand, loyal to Harry, refused to kill him. Instead, it eliminated the foreign soul as if purging an infection. This is perhaps the only time the killing curse worked on a Horcrux, and even then, only because of layers upon layers of narrative and magical convergence. The magical world often relies on metaphysical principles. To kill life, you must use death magic. To unmake a soul's anchor, you need soul-destroying forces. This is why even fiend fire, a chaotic, barely controllable flame of magical origin, could destroy a Horcrux as seen in the destruction of the diadem. But it came at a price. The fire consumed everything. It nearly consumed the trio themselves. Avada Kedavra, by contrast, is precise, controlled. It doesn't consume. It ends, but Horcruxes resist endings. Voldemort himself feared this. He never trusted others with knowledge of how to destroy a Horcrux. He never tested his own defenses against the killing curse, because deep down he knew the spell wouldn't work. The soul fragment was not alive. It could not be killed. It could only be destroyed with extreme magical force, the kind that alters the object on a fundamental level. The killing curse, for all its might, does not change what it touches. It leaves behind silence, not destruction. Hermione, always the researcher, surely considered it. She read every book on Horcruxes she could find, every banned text and hidden note. If Avada Kedavra had even a chance of success, she would have tried it. But she didn't. Nor did Dumbledore or Snape or the countless unspeakables who likely brushed against theories of soul magic in the Department of Mysteries. Their silence on the matter speaks louder than a spell ever could. Ultimately, the absence of the killing curse in Horcrux destruction is not a plot hole. It is a reflection of Rowling's magical universe, a world where power is not absolute, where spells have meanings deeper than their incantations, where death cannot touch what is already twisted beyond recognition, and where the path to redemption or victory is never as simple as pointing a wand and saying the words. Even the most deadly spell in the world cannot reach into the darkest corners of a shattered soul, and in the end, That may be the point. Number 18. How did Hermione repair her wand? Hermione Granger's wand was snapped during the escape from Malfoy Manor. It happened suddenly, almost cruelly, when she and her friends were trying to disapparate to safety. The book says it plainly. Hermione's wand flew from her hand and broke in two with a sharp crack. The damage was not symbolic, it was brutal, physical and complete. The wand that had stood by her side from the beginning of her magical education, the one that had helped her master spells far beyond her years, was destroyed in a moment of chaos. And after that, J.K. Rowling says very little. The wand is gone, but Hermione keeps casting spells. Somehow, somewhere, the silence becomes louder. After Harry uses the Elder Wand to fix his own Holly and Phoenix Feather wand in Deathly Hallows, fans assumed, perhaps hopefully, that he used it to repair Hermione's as well. But this is never stated. The scene is deliberate and pointed. Harry does not try to master the Elder Wand. He only wants to restore what he lost. "I'm putting it back where it came from," he says, but there is no mention, no flicker, of Hermione's wand being returned to her. No description of a gesture toward his best friend, no line about a favor done for someone who had suffered alongside him. And yet Hermione never complains about a replacement wand. She never borrows, she simply continues. The wand in question was vine wood with a dragon heartstring core. Ollivander said it matched her personality, determined, intelligent, and relentless. Vine wands are said to seek out owners who are visionaries, those with a hidden depth of perception who can see beyond appearances. Dragon heartstring is a core that produces the most powerful magic, but it also bonds most closely with its master. When such a wand is broken, the severing is deep. A replacement is not a matter of shopping, but of identity. The problem is not just practical, it's emotional. Wands are not like tools. They are symbiotic extensions of a wizard's soul. Dumbledore once said, "You do not really understand the depth of a wand's loyalty until it chooses you." Hermione's wand had chosen her when she was 11. It had grown with her, suffered with her. It had seen her through devil's snare and time-turners, through curses and tears. To lose it was not simply an inconvenience, it was a trauma. Yet Hermione never mourns it on the page. Why? Some readers have suggested that Harry may have restored her wand off-screen with the Elder Wand before returning it to Dumbledore's tomb. It's a convenient theory, but it feels hollow. Harry's decision to use the Elder Wand was personal, private, and introspective. He does not share that moment. He does not speak of fixing Hermione's or Ron's. Rowling, who so often gives small moments of reward after struggle, is silent here. That silence invites speculation. It is also possible that Hermione acquired a new wand, but this presents a fresh mystery. Wand lore is precise. A second wand, even from Ollivander, rarely produces magic as effortlessly as the first. Harry's own experience with Malfoy's wand proves this. It worked for him, but it never felt right. Ron, too, suffered with Charlie's hand-me-down until he got a new one. Hermione, being Hermione, would never settle for a wand that resisted her. She would want her old one back, or she would chase down a replacement with identical wood and core, but that, too, is never described. One overlooked clue comes from the tales of Beedle the Bard. Hermione translates the book, reads it deeply, and understands its hidden meanings. She alone understands the gravity of the Hallows, not just as items but as concepts. She is the one who cautions Harry not to be seduced by the power of the Elder Wand, and yet when he uses it, she does not object. Could it be that Hermione's wand was restored, but not by Harry? There is an ancient spell described in The Warlock's Hairy Heart, one of the darker tales. It speaks of magic that can mend what should remain broken, but at a cost. Magic, the story says, that reaches into the past where hands have failed. This line has no explanation in the narrative, but Hermione references it with unease. Could this be foreshadowing? Might she, in desperation, have tried a forbidden repair? Another possibility lies in her time with the goblins. At Gringotts, Hermione takes on the appearance of Bellatrix Lestrange. It's a harrowing transformation, but it also brings her into close proximity with the vaults of ancient families. Goblins are known to enchant and forge magical items. They do not share their secrets easily, but they respect power and intellect. If Hermione bartered or bargained with them, perhaps offering knowledge or a favour in return, she may have gained access to their smithing magic. She may have asked them to repair the wand using techniques that predated wand lore itself. There's also the question of Ollivander. After being rescued from Malfoy Manor, he is frail but lucid. He has spent decades studying wand lore, and his insights are unmatched. Hermione speaks with him more than once after his rescue. She respects him. She would have questioned him. Would she have asked how to fix her wand? Would Ollivander have told her something hidden, something passed down from wandmaker to apprentice across generations? There's a line in Deathly Hallows when Ollivander says softly, "The wand chooses the wizard, but the wizard can influence the wand too." That line is often overlooked. Perhaps Hermione found a way to influence the wand, not through power, but through will. Still, Hermione is not the type to flaunt a repair. She is modest in victory and pragmatic in loss. If she did fix her wand, she would not make a spectacle of it. She would not brag. She would not need acknowledgement. For her, the victory is in the function, not the recognition. She is, after all, the witch who used a time-turner and never spoke of it. Yet the magic that might fix a wand is not simple. The Elder Wand is described as the most powerful wand in existence. It can perform feats of magic that would be impossible for any other wand. Harry uses it to repair his own broken wand with a flourish, and the result is instant. The wand sparked to life, the book says. The implication is that this level of magic is unique. But if Harry had repaired Hermione's wand in the same way, wouldn't that merit a moment of awe? Wouldn't she at least thank him? The absence is glaring. A single theory stands out as both possible and poetic. Hermione may have fixed her wand herself, using knowledge unknown to others. She is, after all, the brightest witch of her age. She read every book in the library. She knew ancient runes. She deciphered logic puzzles that stumped Death Eaters. Perhaps she discovered a hidden spell in one of the texts she took from Dumbledore's office, a spell that required sacrifice, memory, or even part of her own magic, a spell that no one else dared use. In The Prince's Tale, Snape says, "You have your mother's eyes." A small line, but with power. Magic often passes through emotion, through memory and love. If Hermione poured her emotions into a ritual, her grief, her longing, her determination, perhaps the wand responded. Perhaps it remembered her. Perhaps the bond was not entirely severed. Wands can be buried with their masters. Wands can resist owners. But wands can also, on rare occasions, return. Garrick Ollivander once described this phenomenon when he said, "A wand may accept a new owner if won, but true allegiance is a mysterious thing." If allegiance can persist after death, can it not persist after destruction? If the wand still recognized Hermione as its mistress, perhaps all it needed was her touch. The books are full of magic unspoken. Fawkes's tears heal wounds no spell can mend. The Room of Requirement answers need, not commands. The Marauder's map recognizes intent. Magic, in Rowling's world, responds to heart more than rules. And Hermione's heart, though often ruled by logic, is deeply loyal. She does not give up. She does not walk away, not from friends and not from challenges. When she appears in the epilogue, Hermione is confident, content, and composed. She is not carrying someone else's wand. She has moved on, but only after reclaiming what was lost. Her wand, like her story, continues. Whether it was repaired by goblins, by the Elder Wand, or by a hidden spell of her own making, one truth remains. Hermione Granger does not leave things broken. And so readers must make peace with the silence. Rowling may never clarify how Hermione repaired her wand, but in doing so, she leaves room for imagination. For once, the magic is ours to finish. The girl who memorized textbooks and risked everything for her friends would not have let a broken wand stop her. Somehow, some way she brought it back. And that is the most Hermione thing she could have done. Number 19. Why did Tom Riddle use the diary if he didn't know about horcruxes? Of all the questions that swirl around the dark life of Tom Marvolo Riddle, few are as quietly unsettling as the mystery of the diary. In the Chamber of Secrets, we are told that the diary was used to manipulate Ginny Weasley to open the chamber once again and to attempt the return of a 16-year-old memory of Tom Riddle. And yet, when Albus Dumbledore later explains the nature of horcruxes in The Half-Blood Prince, he tells Harry that Riddle only began creating horcruxes after he left Hogwarts. If this is true, if Riddle knew nothing of horcruxes while still a student, then the diary's existence becomes a paradox. Why would a teenage boy not yet obsessed with immortality through soul-splitting leave behind an object containing his very soul? This is not a mere oversight. Rowling herself presents the diary as a horcrux of exceptional danger, in Dumbledore's words, because it was the only one designed not just to hide a soul fragment, but to act. While the other 6 horcruxes were hidden, jealously guarded and buried in secrecy, the diary was a weapon. It was meant to be found, meant to be used. That alone makes it unique, but it also raises a chilling question. How could Riddle have designed such a purposeful, magical object without full understanding of horcruxes? Is it possible that he stumbled upon the soul-splitting ritual earlier than Dumbledore believed? Or was the diary created first and only later turned into a horcrux? If so, the intention behind it changes entirely. When we examine the sequence of events, the diary appears to have been crafted shortly after Riddle's murder of Moaning Myrtle in the girls' bathroom. This was the first murder we know of committed when Riddle was still a student. This death gave him the opportunity to create his first horcrux, yet Dumbledore says explicitly that Riddle came back years later, asking questions about soul-splitting. Very few know of it. Slughorn refused to answer his questions, Dumbledore tells Harry, but this implies the curiosity came later, when Riddle had already left the school and had started collecting trophies like Hepzibah Smith's cup. So what, then, was the diary when it was first created? It is more plausible to believe that the diary was originally meant to be a vessel of memory, not of soul. Tom Riddle, brilliant and dangerously manipulative, had already developed a deep fascination with the Chamber of Secrets and its monstrous guardian. He wanted to preserve the knowledge of how to open it, to record his version of history, to leave behind proof of his triumph over the school and its founders' secrets. In this reading, the diary began as an enchanted journal, an echo of Riddle's mind rather than his essence, a tool perhaps to allow a future heir to continue his work. But once he discovered the theory of horcruxes, once he learned of souls splitting through murder, he may have returned to this relic and infused it with his soul, corrupting memory into parasitic life. Consider the power the diary wields over Ginny Weasley. It does not merely possess her, it erases her identity, makes her doubt her own mind, and eventually attempts to kill through her hands. This is not a passive container. It is a willful, sentient piece of Riddle. It remembers, it manipulates, it grows stronger. This, again, sets it apart from all other horcruxes, which lie dormant and must be destroyed with effort. He disappeared into himself, says Ginny, terrified, when the truth comes out. I couldn't stop writing in it. It was like he was feeding off me. The idea of a horcrux that feeds, learns, evolves, that is a terrifying deviation from its traditional purpose. And yet it's exactly what Riddle would want if he meant the diary not as a hiding place, but as a seed. But if we accept that Riddle didn't yet know about horcruxes, then how did this seed become so potent? We must then consider the possibility that the diary in its original form was something else entirely, something magical but incomplete. The enchantment that allowed Riddle's memory to speak from the pages might have been an experimental charm, a first stab at magical preservation. Perhaps like the portraits in Hogwarts, it was meant to simulate consciousness, but unlike those safe, static echoes, Riddle's diary responded to the reader. It adapted, it drew out secrets, it possessed. Could it be that this was unintentional, that young Riddle, playing with dark magic, created something far more dangerous than he realized? And yet the design of the diary argues against accident. It was meant to be given to someone, it was meant to cause harm, and it was meant to open the chamber again long after Riddle had vanished. Why leave such a trail? It runs counter to the secrecy he prized in later life. His other horcruxes were buried in cursed caves, hidden in ancestral homes, guarded by inferi and serpents. The diary was left in a girl's cauldron. This suggests a different stage in Riddle's development, one when he still craved recognition, when he still wanted the world to know what he had done. It wasn't enough to be Slytherin's heir. He wanted to be remembered as the heir who brought Hogwarts to its knees. The diary may then reflect a transitional phase in Riddle's soul, not yet entirely consumed by paranoia, not yet splintered into fragments beyond repair. This was a boy who had discovered the chamber, tamed the basilisk, killed a student, and framed another. He had power, but not yet the insight to protect it. He had ego, but not yet the fear that drove him to create 6 more soul jars. The diary, then, is a record of triumph. And when he eventually learned of horcruxes, he saw the diary for what it could become, not just a book, but a vessel, perhaps even his first test, his first trial run, before committing to the irreversible horror of dividing himself further. The fatal act that created the diary horcrux was most likely Myrtle's death. It fits the timeline, it fits the emotional weight. The girl died, screaming, her body discarded. Riddle stood over her corpse, still a boy, but already something less than human. This was not a crime of passion. It was surgical, cold, necessary. And perhaps in that moment he didn't even know what he was doing. Perhaps the ritual came later, but the intention was always there. And once he learned how to split the soul, he simply returned to that moment, to that book, and bound the soul fragment to the diary with the knowledge he had since acquired. There is also the unsettling notion that Riddle lied to Slughorn, pretending not to know about horcruxes in order to confirm what he already suspected. His question to the potions master, what would happen if someone made 7, was too precise, too ambitious for idle curiosity. Dumbledore believes Riddle only began pursuing horcruxes after leaving school. But Riddle was a master of deception. He concealed his experiments, his heritage, and his intentions for years. Why not this too? Why not pretend to be learning when he was already practicing? It's important to note that the diary was not destroyed immediately after Ginny's possession. When Harry plunges the basilisk fang into its heart, the ink bleeds like blood. The scream that follows is not merely one of pain, it is rage, horror, fear. This horcrux did not want to die. It had grown strong enough to value its own existence, separate from Riddle. That emotional reaction, so vividly described by Rowling, tells us that the soul fragment within the diary had developed beyond its original parameters. It was no longer a tool. It was a being. In that perhaps lies the real reason for the diary's existence. Not immortality, not resurrection, but continuity. A younger Riddle, not yet capable of making 7 horcruxes, may have wanted to leave behind a path for his ideology. Not a copy of himself, but a disciple. Someone who would open the chamber again. Someone who would finish what he began. And when Ginny faltered, the diary took matters into its own hands. I've always been able to charm the people I needed, the memory tells Harry. So Ginny poured out her soul to me. These are the words of someone who believes he has a future, even if only in someone else's hands. That the diary is the only horcrux to interact directly with the victim is no coincidence. It was made with that in mind, and perhaps as Riddle grew darker, more paranoid, more withdrawn, he saw the flaws in that design. Perhaps that is why the ring, the locket, the diadem, and the rest were never meant to be used. They were to be hidden, locked away. The diary was a young man's mistake, or a young man's ambition, unchecked by fear. Either way, it stands apart from the rest. It is not a horcrux in the traditional sense. It is an invitation. An invitation to chaos, to ideology, to revenge. Voldemort, even as a boy, knew that power was not just in spells, but in stories. The story of the chamber, the story of the air, the story of a girl possessed. And through the diary, he nearly wrote a new chapter for Hogwarts, one soaked in blood. The soul fragment inside was more than a safeguard. It was a seedling of a future world, one where his voice would echo long after his body vanished. In the end, perhaps that is why the diary feels like a contradiction, because it is one. It straddles the line between memory and soul, between invention and obsession. It reflects the moment when Tom Riddle stopped being a boy and became something else entirely. Not yet Voldemort, but no longer human either. It was the first true act of splitting, not just of soul, but of self. And in that split the diary was born, not as a mistake, not as an accident, but as the first shadow of what he would become. Number 20. Why didn't Voldemort check his soul? Of all the mysteries that surround Lord Voldemort, one question slices through the core of his obsession like a cursed blade. Why did the most paranoid, calculating, and power-hungry wizard of the age never verify the state of his own soul? It is not a rhetorical curiosity. It is a genuine conundrum that lingers behind every destroyed horcrux, every miscalculation he made, and, most poignantly, behind his final downfall. He was the man who feared death more than anything, who split his soul again and again to ensure it could never be undone. And yet he never stopped to count the pieces. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore muses aloud the dreadful theory. By the time he was 17, you say, he had already created a horcrux at that age, and then he went on and made more? Harry's silence in response is telling. They both suspect the unspeakable. And by the time of Deathly Hallows, the final tally becomes critical. 7 horcruxes, the symbolic number of magical perfection. But of course, there were only 6 actual vessels. The 7th fragment, the one Voldemort never intended, lived inside Harry himself. Dumbledore called it a fluke, a mistake born of reckless cruelty and a soul already splintered. But the true shock isn't that Voldemort made an extra horcrux. The shock is that he never realized he had done so. This suggests something even darker than arrogance. It suggests a blind spot in his supposed omniscience. Voldemort's knowledge of dark magic was vast. He was no dilettante. He sought out ancient tomes in the deepest corners of the world, from the restricted section of the Hogwarts library to the forbidden libraries of Borgin and Burke's. He consulted twisted, obscure magic few dared to whisper about. He asked Horace Slughorn about horcruxes, not to learn what they were, but to confirm that he could make more than one. He already knew the theory. He wanted reassurance that it could be pushed further. Given all this, the question sharpens. Why wouldn't he also seek out a way to assess what remained of his soul? Surely a wizard so obsessed with immortality would wish to know whether he had succeeded. Surely he would wish to know how many anchors tied him to the mortal world. And yet, by every indication, he does not. He rages when his horcruxes are destroyed, yes, but never because he feels the damage. He feels the theft, the betrayal, the threat to his security, not the spiritual pain, not the loss of self. When Nagini is killed, Voldemort screams. When the locket is stolen, he is furious. But nowhere does the text suggest that he experiences a psychic diminishment. He does not stagger or weaken as Harry destroys the diary, the cup, the ring, the diadem. He is not seen clutching his chest or suffering hallucinations or even sensing a tear in his essence. It is as though his connection to his own soul has been severed. long before Harry even begins hunting horcruxes. This should trouble the reader. It implies that Voldemort, for all his cunning, does not feel the loss because he never truly understood the nature of what he was doing. He was manipulating forces of such magnitude that they required reverence, precision, and reflection. But Tom Riddle was never one to reflect. He consumed knowledge like a predator, used magic like a blade, and treated his soul like a resource to be mined. In that recklessness lies the answer to his blindness. But recklessness alone is not enough. He was, after all, methodical in other ways. He arranged his horcruxes with symbolic resonance. The ring of the Gaunts, the cup of Hufflepuff, the locket of Slytherin, the diadem of Ravenclaw, the diary he used as a weapon, and finally, Nagini, each object tied to something personal, powerful, or sacred. He spread them across protected locations. He tested their defenses. He trusted no one with their secret, not even Bellatrix or Snape. He layered protections upon protections. He even used the Fidelius-like enchantments around the cave. So again, how can it be that the one thing he did not do was verify his own success? One plausible theory is that magic to verify the soul is too dark or too rare even for Voldemort, but that does not hold under scrutiny. This is the same man who murdered to rip his soul apart, the same man who created a body using bone, blood, and forbidden rituals in the graveyard, the same man who experimented on himself to the point of physical transformation, snake-like face, red eyes, white skin. Voldemort feared no taboo. If such magic existed, he would have sought it, he would have wielded it. There is a chilling line in Half-Blood Prince where Dumbledore says, "It is perhaps the most terrible and evil of all magic, to rip the soul apart." And yet, even he, the cautious master of secrets, understands its nature. If Dumbledore could grasp it, Voldemort certainly could. So if Voldemort didn't perform the soul-checking ritual, it means one of two things. Either it does not exist, or he chose not to know. The idea that Voldemort chose ignorance is deeply disturbing. It would suggest that even he had limits, not moral ones, but emotional ones. Perhaps the thought of seeing what remained of his soul was unbearable. A mirror of the soul might reveal horrors no man can survive. Perhaps he feared to look too closely. Perhaps he suspected that what he had become would be too monstrous even for him. The idea of confronting a mutilated, bleeding, shredded echo of a soul may have been too great a risk to his self-image as a god. This leads us to the moment in Deathly Hallows where Harry, in King's Cross, sees the pitiful flayed baby under the bench. Dumbledore tells him, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." But there is more. That soul fragment is not just sad, it is unspeakable, and Harry cannot help but feel a tremor of fear and disgust. This is what Voldemort never saw. This is what he never dared to witness. It may be that Voldemort believed the ritual of making a horcrux was self-contained, that once completed, the soul fragment safely resided in its vessel and no lingering connection was necessary. He might have trusted the magic more than he trusted his own instincts. He might have assumed infallibility. After all, no one had done what he had. No one had split the soul so many times. Who was left to warn him of the consequences? Even in his return to physical form, Voldemort does not reflect on the nature of his soul. He is angry at death, angry at his defeat, furious at those who opposed him, but never once does he express fear that part of him is missing. Never once does he ask whether his failure had a deeper cause. He remains outward-focused, blaming others, cursing others, killing others. Introspection would have been a weakness. This absence of introspection is, ironically, what seals his fate. When Harry chooses to walk into the Forbidden Forest to die, Voldemort believes he has won. But it is only because he has not understood that part of himself. His most dangerous fragment has been lodged inside the boy all along. He never asked, never noticed, never guessed. And when Harry returns from death, Voldemort is finally mortal, but still he does not know why. There is another unsettling detail. When Voldemort possesses Harry in the Department of Mysteries, he is driven out by Harry's emotions. "You're the weak one, and you'll never know love or friendship, and I feel sorry for you." These feelings are so repulsive to Voldemort that he cannot bear to inhabit Harry's body. What if, in that moment, something in his fragmented soul flickered in pain? What if the presence of the horcrux in Harry created a resonance Voldemort did not understand and chose to dismiss? This blindness persisted to the end. When the Elder Wand fails him, Voldemort does not question the deeper logic of ownership or loyalty or connection. He lashes out. When Nagini is killed, he does not think, "That was the last tether to my soul." He thinks, "They have taken my weapon." In the end, he dies not knowing the truth. The man who wanted to master death never understood the magic he manipulated. He drowned in his own arrogance. Perhaps the most telling moment is when Harry speaks to Voldemort in their final confrontation. "Does it hurt?" Harry asks. "Dying?" Voldemort does not answer. Perhaps because he does not know, perhaps because, for the first time, he is experiencing the full force of a soul that has been torn too many times. Perhaps the magic he never tried, the one that could have shown him what remained of himself, would have been his only chance at salvation. But Voldemort never asked the question, and that is why he never found the answer. Number 21. Why didn't Harry use Sirius's mirror earlier? Of all the magical items Harry Potter inherited, none seem more tragically underused than the two-way mirror given to him by Sirius Black. It first appears in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, not during the main action of the book, but as a posthumous discovery, buried beneath grief and dust, wrapped in the echoes of what might have been. Sirius had gifted the mirror to Harry, along with the promise that they could communicate at any time, and yet, by the time Harry actually used it, during the Deathly Hallows, Sirius was already gone. The mirror, cracked and useless for its original purpose, became a silent symbol of missed opportunities. The question lingers like a ghost in Grimmauld Place. Why didn't Harry use it earlier? Why not in the Department of Mysteries, when a single moment of doubt could have been resolved by a glance? In the chaos of fifth year, when Harry is increasingly isolated, haunted by dreams of corridors and doors, and boiling with resentment toward Dumbledore's aloofness, the mirror was already in his possession. Sirius had given it to him at Christmas, hidden in the bottom of his school trunk. It is only after Sirius's death that Harry rediscovers it and smashes it in a fit of rage and despair. The pieces of that mirror reflect more than Harry's face. They reflect every moment he could have used it to prevent tragedy. He had given it to Sirius as a Christmas present, the book says. He had not opened it. It is a subtle line, almost cruel in its simplicity. The unopened mirror is a sealed fate. The tragedy is more than personal. It is structural. The Department of Mysteries disaster was built on a foundation of uncertainty and manipulation. Lord Voldemort plants the vision of Sirius being tortured in Harry's mind, knowing the boy would rush into action. And he does. But Harry had a tool that could have invalidated the entire trap. The mirror would have shown him Sirius safe and sound at Grimmauld Place, alive and free. With that single glance, the dominoes that led to Sirius's death might never have fallen. Yet Harry never remembered to use it. Or worse, he forgot he had it at all. The reason lies partly in the emotional storm Harry lived through during Order of the Phoenix. His relationship with Sirius had become intense, almost desperate. Sirius represented not just a godfather, but a link to Harry's parents, a whisper of the life he might have had. When Harry believed Sirius was in danger, he could not think logically. Hermione, level-headed and skeptical, suggested checking. "How do you know he's there?" she asked. But even then, Harry didn't think of the mirror. He chose action, driven by fear and love, and Sirius died for it. There is a haunting irony in that the tool designed to foster connection became a relic of regret. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry pulls out a sliver of the mirror from his pouch, it's no longer a means of speaking with Sirius. It becomes a thread to Aberforth Dumbledore, a different rescuer, a different man, but its origin remains the same. A blue eye looked out at him from the mirror fragment, the book says, and Harry thinks it's Dumbledore, the real one. The mirror becomes a window, not just to another room, but to another life, another chance. But that's the essence of tragedy in E.T., knowing the rescue came too late. The mechanics of the mirror are also crucial. This was no ordinary magical item. It was powerful, intimate, and unique. James and Sirius had once used them to talk across the castle when they were at Hogwarts. Sirius, nostalgic and desperate to maintain a bond with Harry, gave it to him with a similar intent. But he made a mistake. He never explained what it was. He simply said, "Use it, if you need me." That vagueness is damning. Harry didn't understand the importance of what he held, and in the distraction of exams, fights with Umbridge, and dreams from Voldemort, the mirror became just another forgotten object. Some might argue it was Harry's youth and inexperience that led to the oversight. At 15, he was drowning in emotions, targeted by the Dark Lord, and manipulated by a ministry that painted him a liar. Dumbledore, who might have advised him on such magical objects, had distanced himself to protect Harry from Voldemort's mental reach. The boy had no guidance. Sirius was reckless and impulsive, hardly a model of stable mentorship. Remus Lupin was absent. The burden of making wise decisions fell solely on Harry's shoulders, and those shoulders were already breaking. The failure to use the mirror is not just Harry's, it is a collective failure layered in miscommunication. Sirius, in his frustration with being trapped in Grimmauld Place, might have believed the mirror would let him remain relevant in Harry's life, but he failed to deliver its value. A single moment, a direct explanation, "This mirror shows me your face and mine to you," could have changed the future. Instead, the message was left to interpretation. And in the wizarding world, that can be lethal. What makes this oversight more poignant is the fact that Harry did use magical communication when desperate. During the Ministry battle, he used the Flu network, sending Creature and then trying to contact Sirius through Umbridge's fireplace. These methods were flawed, dangerous, and noisy. The mirror, silent and safe, was sitting in his trunk the whole time. This underscores the bitter irony. Magic is abundant in the wizarding world, but only effective when understood. One might ask, did J.K. Rowling introduce the mirror only as a convenience later in the story? Perhaps. The mirror reappears in Deathly Hallows almost as a deus ex machina. Harry glimpses an eye and follows a trail that leads to Aberforth, who rescues him and his friends from Malfoy Manor. It is abrupt, and the details about how Aberforth got the other mirror half are murky. Sirius supposedly had it, and after his death, it somehow passed into Aberforth's possession. There's no explanation. It is a hole patched with narrative glue. But even so, the emotional weight of the mirror remains undeniable. It is an artifact of a failed connection, a symbol of everything that Harry and Sirius lost, not just in death, but in life. Sirius, who longed to be a father figure, offered a lifeline that was never grasped. Harry, who needed guidance, missed the one tool that might have saved them both. The mirror became a silent monument to their miscommunication. Another example of this emotional detachment is found when Harry finally smashes the mirror. It's not just an object, it's a representation of his anger, his guilt, and his failure. He throws it into his school trunk and forgets it until desperation forces him to reach back into old memories. When he retrieves the shard in Deathly Hallows, it's not because he expects help, it's because he's clinging to anything that remains of the people he loved. He sees a blue eye and follows it because that's all he has left. In that way, the mirror becomes more than a magical device. It's a storytelling mechanism, one that mirrors the reader's frustration too. We want to reach into the book and shake Harry. "Use the mirror," we'd cry, as if our voices could penetrate fiction. But that's what makes the story real. In life, as in literature, people overlook the obvious. They forget tools at their disposal. They act from fear instead of thought. That's what Harry did, and in doing so, he became more human. Even Dumbledore, with all his wisdom, never asks about the mirror. He sees Harry's suffering, his self-recrimination after Sirius's death, but doesn't probe the details. Dumbledore, for all his brilliance, is also a man weighed down by his own mistakes. Perhaps he knew about the mirror, perhaps he chose not to ask. Or perhaps, and this is more likely, he too forgot. Later, when Harry uses the mirror shard during Deathly Hallows, it becomes a path to redemption. Aberforth Dumbledore sees Harry's eye, responds and provides sanctuary. It is not the mirror's original function, but it is fitting. The same tool that failed to save Sirius becomes the means by which Harry saves others. It's a quiet form of poetic justice, or perhaps a reminder that even broken things can still serve a purpose. The narrative failure, Harry not using the mirror earlier, serves as a broader theme of the books. It speaks to the chaos of adolescence, the cost of war, and the price of missed chances. J.K. Rowling doesn't hand her characters easy victories. She lets them stumble. She allows grief to feel real. If Harry had used the mirror and prevented Sirius's death, the story would have been cleaner, but less honest. Because in real life, people forget, people act too late. And so the mirror remains a shard of what might have been, a splinter of a better ending. It glints with possibility, but only in retrospect. When Harry finally looks into it and sees not Sirius, but a stranger with a similar eye, it is as if the universe has mocked him, and then offered him another chance. Aberforth is not Sirius, but he is help. He is rescue, and Harry, older now, wiser from pain, finally accepts it. In the end, Harry never needed a mirror to speak to Sirius. He needed time, understanding, and a world that allowed joy to last longer than a single conversation. The mirror, beautiful and forgotten, reflects the heart of the Harry Potter saga. Love, loss, and the quiet agony of what if. Number 22. Why didn't Voldemort use his mental connection with Harry more often? In the depths of the Department of Mysteries, Harry's scar seared with pain, a white-hot flash that split his mind and tethered him to a world he did not wish to see. Nagini slithered down a corridor, her senses alert, her prey, the unsuspecting Arthur Weasley. Through her eyes, Harry saw everything, the flick of the serpent's tongue, the shimmer of torchlight on polished stone, the sudden violence. This was not a dream. This was possession. This was Voldemort inside his mind. The fifth book, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, makes it unmistakably clear that a mental link between Harry and Lord Voldemort exists, and yet this terrifying connection remains curiously underused. One might expect a dark wizard as cunning and ambitious as Voldemort to exploit such a channel relentlessly, but he does not. The question then burns brighter than Harry's scar ever did. Why? Throughout the series, the connection appears selectively, mostly during moments of emotional intensity. When Voldemort is angry, Harry feels it. When Voldemort is triumphant, Harry knows. The connection is volatile and one-directional in these moments, giving Harry uninvited glimpses into Voldemort's movements and moods. But Voldemort himself does not often attempt to probe Harry's mind intentionally, at least not openly, despite having the advantage. In Order of the Phoenix, he does use the link once, brilliantly and cruelly, planting a vision of Sirius Black being tortured in the Department of Mysteries. The vision manipulates Harry into action, sending him and his friends directly into Voldemort's trap. It works. Sirius dies. Voldemort's hand remains unseen. And yet, even after such success, Voldemort does not repeat the strategy. This restraint seems inconsistent with Voldemort's character. He is not known for mercy or hesitation. He uses every weapon at his disposal: horcruxes, curses, fear, and manipulation. So why not use this one? The answer may lie in his nature. Voldemort, as Dumbledore notes, has never loved, nor can he love. His inability to understand selfless emotions blinds him. When he first experiences the connection with Harry, he dismisses it as a side effect of their shared past. He underestimates it, and underestimates Harry. It is this arrogance, this assumption that the boy is nothing more than a pawn that prevents him from fully considering the potential of the bond. Dumbledore, by contrast, perceives the bond as dangerous. He distances himself from Harry throughout Order of the Phoenix for precisely this reason. "I cared about you too much," he confesses later. Dumbledore suspects that the connection might allow Voldemort to see through Harry's eyes, just as Harry sees through Voldemort's. The risk is mutual, and that changes everything. If Voldemort peers too often into Harry's mind, he might reveal something himself, something he cannot afford to lose: secrets, locations, plans, or worse, vulnerabilities. And Voldemort is nothing if not secretive. He hoards knowledge the way dragons hoard gold. Voldemort may also fear exposure of his own emotions. There is a moment in The Half-Blood Prince when Dumbledore tells Harry that Voldemort has ripped his soul into so many pieces he doesn't feel anything anymore. But that's not entirely true. Voldemort does feel rage, humiliation, desire for dominance. When Harry accesses these feelings, as he does in flashes during their connection, Voldemort becomes vulnerable. The night he possesses Harry at the Ministry, something strange happens. "If death is nothing, Dumbledore, kill the boy," Voldemort taunts. But he cannot hold on. Something in Harry repels him. Love, loss, grief, emotions Voldemort cannot comprehend, much less endure. As Rowling writes, Voldemort was gone and Harry was left lying on the floor, his body racked with pain. But he knew Voldemort had fled. Harry's heart had proved too full, too human. Another reason Voldemort might avoid frequent use of the link lies in its unpredictability. The connection is not a wand he can wave. It is alive, reactive, and shaped by both participants. The more Voldemort pushes, the more Harry resists. After Sirius's death, Harry begins occlumency lessons with Professor Snape, a decision Dumbledore insists upon. Though the lessons go poorly, Harry resents Snape too much to concentrate. He does manage to build some mental walls. When the connection flares up again, it's often without clear purpose. Voldemort cannot command it like he can a Death Eater. He cannot invade Harry at will. It happens when Harry's emotions are high or when Voldemort's are. The bond is not an open door, but rather a shared wound, stinging unpredictably. Even when Voldemort does intentionally exploit the bond, he risks exposing himself. The vision of Sirius was a calculated move, but it required a convincing illusion, one that could not be repeated. Had Voldemort tried to lure Harry again using the same method, Harry might not have taken the bait. Moreover, the cost of entering Harry's mind seems to grow. During their final year, when Voldemort becomes obsessed with hunting the Elder Wand, Harry glimpses scenes of his frustration. Grindelwald in Nurmengard, the grave of Dumbledore desecrated. Voldemort is unaware of Harry's spying. If he had known, he might have attempted to block the link. Perhaps he even tried. But by then it was too late. The connection itself, forged on the night Voldemort attempted to kill the infant Harry, is born of ancient, unpredictable magic. Lily's sacrifice, the rebounding curse, and the piece of soul that clung to Harry, all these elements twisted fate. Voldemort never intended for a part of his soul to live inside another being. That part of him, unguarded and raw, gave Harry access to Voldemort's mind. But it also gave Voldemort access to something alien and terrifying: human feeling. Each time Voldemort peers into Harry, he risks seeing something he cannot understand. He risks being changed. Indeed, during the final battle at Hogwarts, when Harry walks to his death, the connection reaches its peak. As Harry prepares to die, Voldemort believes the boy broken, but instead Harry finds clarity. In that moment of self-sacrifice, Harry becomes everything Voldemort is not, and the link, once a potential weapon, becomes a mirror of Voldemort's failure. For all his power, Voldemort could not comprehend the force that ultimately defeats him. As Harry lies in the Forbidden Forest, Voldemort casts the killing curse again, but it kills only the fragment of himself. The piece of soul that had lived in Harry was gone. With it, the connection is severed. There is also the matter of fear. Voldemort, though a master of dark magic, is ruled by fear. Fear of death, fear of exposure, fear of weakness. The link to Harry is all three. It represents a mystery he did not choose, a pathway he cannot control. Even his obsession with prophecy, neither can live while the other survives, drives him to eliminate Harry through brute force rather than subtlety. He prefers to kill Harry directly rather than manipulate him through the mind. Control is everything to Voldemort, and this connection, while useful, is too wild to be wielded reliably. What's more, the very existence of the bond undermines Voldemort's identity. He believes himself unique, separate from humanity, above ordinary mortals. Sharing anything, especially his mind, with another being is an insult to his beliefs. That the other being is a half-blood schoolboy only intensifies the humiliation. To acknowledge the link is to admit imperfection, and Voldemort does not admit flaws. He buries them, denies them, or kills them. The bond with Harry is not a tool, it is a scar, a consequence of a failed curse. It reminds him that he is not invincible. And then there's the prophecy. Had Voldemort truly understood it, he might have acted differently, but he misreads it. Always. The prophecy speaks of the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. Voldemort assumes this power is something external, magic, knowledge, a spell. He fails to see that the real power is love, and the bond is a byproduct of love's victory. To use the bond frequently would be to interact with love's residue with the part of Harry formed by protection and sacrifice. Voldemort recoils from it as he recoils from the locket's false horcrux vision of his own death. He is not brave enough to face what lies within the link. Even from a tactical standpoint, the link offers diminishing returns. Harry matures, he grows cautious. The moment he suspects manipulation, as after Sirius's death, he begins to guard his thoughts. By Deathly Hallows, he actively deceives the connection, using it as a source of intelligence. Voldemort's advantage fades. The bond is no longer a one-way street, but a corridor of echoes, dangerous to both. There is an irony in this. Voldemort, who seeks control over death, time, and destiny, creates his own downfall through oversight. He plants the fragment of soul that allows the connection. He dismisses its significance. He uses it only once with cunning and success. Then he retreats, believing himself above it. His neglect gives Harry the time he needs to grow, to learn, to fight back. And in the end, it is Harry who walks willingly into death, not Voldemort. Harry, who understands pain, who has lost family, friends, innocence. Harry, who wins by surrendering. In this way, the bond becomes symbolic. It is a thread tying life to death, self to other, good to evil. It is not used often because it cannot be. It is not a spell. It is not dark magic. It is love's shadow cast on the soul of a killer. Voldemort never fully understands it, and perhaps that is the point. In his world, where fear reigns and love is weakness, he cannot fathom a connection that asks nothing and gives everything. When Harry finally faces Voldemort in the Great Hall, the bond is gone. What remains is understanding. Voldemort tries one last time to dominate with power, but Harry knows better. "Try for some remorse, Riddle," he says. But remorse would mean looking inward. It would mean touching that broken soul, acknowledging the bond for what it was, a remnant of humanity. Voldemort refuses, and so he dies, not as a Dark Lord, but as a man undone by his own blindness, not because he failed to use the connection more, but because he never truly understood it. Number 23. Why didn't Dumbledore reveal more information sooner? Albus Dumbledore was never a man of plain answers. Throughout Harry Potter's journey, the headmaster seemed to move pieces on an invisible chessboard, orchestrating complex plays whose logic only revealed itself, if at all, when the game was nearly over. Time and again, Harry found himself tangled in dangerous situations, ill-equipped with knowledge he could have used earlier. Dumbledore's delays in revealing the truth about horcruxes, the prophecy, and even Voldemort's soul raise uncomfortable questions. Why withhold vital truths from the one person fated to confront the Dark Lord? Why such elaborate silence, especially when so much was at stake? From the very first book, Dumbledore cultivates a habit of secrecy. After the events in the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry asks Dumbledore why Voldemort wanted to kill him, the headmaster replies, "When you are older, I think you will know." But Harry was already risking his life. He had faced Voldemort, albeit in spectral form, and nearly died. And yet Dumbledore walked away from that moment with the most cryptic of answers. At that point he knew about the prophecy, he knew what had to happen, but Harry was left in the dark. The pattern repeats. In the Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore praises Harry's loyalty to him when Fawkes arrives in the chamber. He says, "You must have shown me real loyalty down in the chamber. Nothing but that could have called Fawkes to you." This shows Dumbledore was aware of Harry's deepening courage, yet even after the encounter with Tom Riddle's diary, one of the horcruxes, he says nothing about the existence of soul fragments. The diary was the first clear sign that Voldemort had defied the natural laws of death. Dumbledore confiscated it and began piecing together the horcrux theory. But Harry remained unaware. That silence seems almost negligent. By the time of the events in The Prisoner of Azkaban, Dumbledore knows that Harry can cast a corporeal Patronus, that he has faced death and fought Dementors, and that he is not a typical student. Still, he says nothing about the prophecy. He watches as Harry continues to believe that the only significant event surrounding his birth was his parents' murder. Yet Dumbledore knows Harry's entire life was shaped by a single prophecy, one that could have changed the course of everything if explained earlier. What would it have meant for Harry to grow up knowing not only that he was marked by Voldemort, but that he was destined to face him? Would it have crushed him or given him purpose? Dumbledore's decision to keep the prophecy hidden until the end of Order of the Phoenix is perhaps the most criticized of all. He waits until after Sirius Black's death, a death caused in part by Harry's ignorance and impulsiveness, before finally telling Harry the truth. Neither can live while the other survives. These words had hung over Harry since infancy, and yet Dumbledore chose to let them lie dormant. His reasoning, as explained in the book, is emotionally compelling. He wanted to preserve Harry's childhood. He confesses to Harry, "I have watched you struggling under more burdens than any student who has ever passed through this school. I have watched you suffer. I have watched you fight to survive. I wanted to shield you from a truth that would crush you." But how many deaths could have been prevented if Harry had known sooner? Cedric Diggory's death at the end of Goblet of Fire could perhaps have been avoided if Harry had understood the depth of the prophecy. If he had been taught from the beginning that his survival was intertwined with Voldemort's death, might he have been more prepared for the moment in the graveyard? Or could he have avoided the trap altogether? Even the structure of the Horcrux search is riddled with secrecy. It isn't until Half-Blood Prince that Dumbledore finally begins tutoring Harry in Voldemort's past. And even then, he reveals only fragments. He shows Harry memories, some acquired through coercion or trickery, but never provides the full blueprint. When he does explain Horcruxes, it's in a slow, drip-fed manner. "I think I know what the Horcruxes are," he says, but he does not share everything. He speculates, theorizes, but never lays out a plan. By the time he dies, Harry still doesn't know the number of horcruxes for certain, nor where most of them are. Dumbledore leaves him a snitch and a cryptic message. Why this need for riddles? Why must every revelation be a theatrical unveiling rather than a strategic debriefing? The war was not a play. It wasn't a myth to be uncovered through clues and puzzles. It was blood and fear, death and betrayal. And yet Dumbledore treated Harry's education in this war like a treasure hunt. Even the gifts he leaves in his will, the sword of Gryffindor, the Deluminator, the tale of the three brothers, are delivered without context. Hermione has to deduce that the book is a clue. Ron must discover the Deluminator's function on his own, and Harry spends months figuring out the sword's significance. Consider the moment in Half-Blood Prince when Dumbledore and Harry retrieve the fake horcrux. Dumbledore, already mortally cursed, brings Harry along for what he knows may be a fatal mission. He drinks the potion guarding the locket, suffering pain and hallucinations. He begs, "Don't hurt them, please hurt me instead." Harry watches helplessly. It is a deeply traumatic experience, yet even then Dumbledore withholds the truth. The horcrux is a fake. He knows something is wrong, and he suspects, perhaps even knows, that the locket is not the real horcrux. But he says nothing to Harry even as they flee. That secret leads to Harry's long detour with Ron and Hermione, wasting precious time in the final book. Some might argue that Dumbledore's secrecy was a calculated effort to protect Harry from burdens too great for a teenager, but the timeline doesn't hold up. From the age of 11, Harry was facing Voldemort in one form or another. He encountered Quirrell's possessed body, the Basilisk, Dementors, Death Eaters, dragons, and the Dark Lord himself. The idea that he needed emotional shielding is contradicted by the reality of his life. Dumbledore, of all people, should have known that Harry didn't have the luxury of childhood. If Harry was old enough to fight in the Department of Mysteries, he was old enough to know what he was fighting for. Then there's the case of Severus Snape. Dumbledore trusted Snape more than anyone else, yet never truly explained his plans to Harry. Even after Dumbledore's death, it is Snape, through his memories, who delivers the final truth, that Harry himself is a horcrux. That part of Voldemort's soul lives within him, and that he must die for the Dark Lord to be destroyed. This information is too vital, too central to the plot, to have been left in the hands of another. And yet Dumbledore planned it that way. He wrote no letter, left no instructions. He simply trusted that Snape would survive and that Harry would obey. It was a house of cards built on hope. "I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth," Dumbledore says in the final book. It's a heartbreaking line, but does it justify this suffering that followed? Sirius died not knowing the full stakes. Remus Lupin, Tonks, Fred Weasley, all casualties of a war that might have been shortened had Harry been better informed. Even Harry's own journey to accepting his fate, the moment in the Forbidden Forest when he walks to Voldemort to die, could have been less agonizing if he had known the truth earlier. Instead, it is a lonely revelation uncovered through scattered clues and reluctant allies. Dumbledore's behavior, at times, verges on manipulative. He isolates Harry while pretending to offer mentorship. He praises bravery but withholds tools. He guides but never fully reveals the destination. In many ways, he resembles a general who sends a soldier into battle with half a map. The soldier survives only because of resilience, not because the plan was sound. Harry becomes the hero, not due to Dumbledore's guidance, but despite its gaps. There are moments of vulnerability in Dumbledore, moments that reveal his own fears. He admits that he once sought power, that he feared his own capacity for greatness. He sees himself in Tom Riddle, and perhaps that is why he keeps his distance from power and truth alike. He tells Harry, "It is a curious thing, Harry, but perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it." That philosophy is noble, but it does not justify the withholding of information in a time of war. Even his final plan to have Snape kill him to spare Draco's soul, while noble in intent, leaves the Order fractured and confused. After his death, there is no clear leader, no clear plan. The Horcrux mission is left to teenagers with no adult support, no headquarters, and no fallback. They must rely on instincts and guesses. Had Dumbledore prepared a full briefing, a roadmap, the final battle might have played out differently. Perhaps the most striking irony is that Voldemort thrives on secrets, and so did Dumbledore. Both men believed that knowledge was power, and both guarded their knowledge fiercely. But while Voldemort hoarded secrets for domination, Dumbledore hoarded them for love, for protection, for fear. In the end, both forms of secrecy caused pain, both allowed suffering to spread, and both underestimated the value of honesty. In the final moments, as Harry watches Dumbledore's memory and sees the man's flaws, he forgives him. But the reader may not so easily. For every hidden truth, a life was risked. For every cryptic message, a moment was lost. The war might have ended the same way, but the path to victory was far more harrowing than it needed to be. And at the heart of that path was a man with twinkling eyes and too many secrets. Number 24. Why can't wizards just apparate into Hogwarts during the battle? During the Battle of Hogwarts, the sense of urgency is visceral. Spells fly, giants thunder through courtyards, and the sky above the castle pulses with fire and shadow. Yet among the chaos there is a lingering question that has long troubled thoughtful readers. Why didn't everyone simply apparate into Hogwarts to help? The books are explicit. Apparition into or out of Hogwarts is impossible. But this rule, so firmly stated throughout the series, seems to warp at key moments, especially during the school's final stand against Voldemort. Throughout the Harry Potter series, apparition is a magical method of transportation that allows wizards to vanish from one location and reappear at another in an instant. It is difficult magic, tightly regulated and dangerous when done improperly, but Hogwarts, we are told repeatedly, is an exception. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore tells Harry, "You cannot apparate or disapparate inside the Hogwarts grounds." It's not a suggestion or a preference. It's an established magical law, a shield around the ancient school. Students must instead arrive by train, or in rare cases by boat or carriage. The barrier is so absolute that even ministry officials must respect it. And yet, in Deathly Hallows, when the battle begins, people arrive, many of them, all at once. Lupin and Kingsley appear in the Room of Requirement. Charlie Weasley and Horace Slughorn are seen arriving with groups of reinforcements, but how? Some say they came through Hogsmeade, using the tunnel behind the portrait in the Hog's Head. Aberforth Dumbledore, Albus's reclusive brother, is revealed to be the barkeep there. We're told he helped many of them through the passageway that leads directly into Hogwarts, but this explanation, though repeated, feels too clean. Not every arrival is accounted for, and not everyone came through Aberforth. The logistics, masses of wizards pouring into a secret tunnel, seem less plausible the more one reflects. The enigma deepens when you consider how Albus Dumbledore himself behaves. He is the only known wizard who routinely appears and disappears within Hogwarts, seemingly ignoring the anti-apparition protections. In Goblet of Fire, when Harry is in grave danger in the graveyard, Dumbledore doesn't apparate to his rescue, he waits. But earlier, when summoned to the Ministry, he vanishes from his office in a blink. In Order of the Phoenix, when cornered by Ministry officials, he disappears from Hogwarts in front of everyone, leaving behind Fawkes's golden flash. Is Dumbledore using Phoenix travel? Is he bypassing the rules with ancient magic? If so, why didn't he share this knowledge with the Order? The magic that protects Hogwarts is described as layered and old. "You'd need to be Albus Dumbledore to break through the enchantments on this place," says Professor McGonagall at one point. This lends credibility to the idea that Dumbledore is operating on a level others cannot touch, but after his death, these protections supposedly remain. And still, During the battle, Hogwarts opens its walls to reinforcements with remarkable ease. Minerva McGonagall takes control, rallying defenders and issuing orders, but she never mentions disabling the protective enchantments. There is no ceremony, no breaking of seals, and yet fighters arrive. It's important to note that during the Battle of Hogwarts, Death Eaters also breached the school. Their method is left vague, attributed loosely to the use of the Vanishing Cabinet by Draco Malfoy a year prior. But that event took place when the school's protections were weaker, compromised by Severus Snape's secret alliance with Voldemort. Even then, the effort to allow access required a coordinated year-long plan and nearly killed Draco in the process. How, then, did the Order of the Phoenix manage to bring in dozens of reinforcements within minutes? The Room of Requirement becomes a focal point in this mystery. In Deathly Hallows, it shifts and grows to accommodate the hidden army of students. Neville Longbottom, who has been organising the rebellion in Harry's absence, mentions that the room allows access to a tunnel connected to the Hog's Head. Aberforth's been helping us, he says. The idea is that the tunnel goes beneath the magical protections surrounding Hogwarts, but this relies on the assumption that Aberforth's pub is outside the enchanted boundary. That's never clearly defined. Hogsmeade itself has protections too, especially once the war escalates. So how safe or accessible can that tunnel really be? The nature of magical protections in the wizarding world is notoriously inconsistent. The Fidelius charm, for example, is considered unbreakable until it's broken. Love protects Harry from Voldemort, except when it doesn't. In the same way Hogwarts's defences seem to bend when it suits the narrative, there is no mention in Deathly Hallows of McGonagall formally lowering the anti-apparition enchantments, nor do we see her allowing selective apparition for Order members, and yet people arrive directly into the school, often without much fuss. Kingsley is simply there. So is Oliver Wood, Seamus's parents, and a host of others. One might argue that the chaotic nature of war forced the protections to adapt, that the Room of Requirement, which seems to possess a sentient intelligence, facilitated safe passage when it sensed the need. But this is speculation. If the room had such power, why didn't Voldemort attempt to exploit it further? He knew of its existence, Draco used it, and the Death Eaters knew the school well. Instead, Voldemort spends most of the battle standing outside the walls, waiting, commanding, probing. He doesn't enter until the final stages. Another possibility is that apparition into Hogwarts is blocked only at ground level. If the protective wards form a dome, perhaps tunnels and passageways allow bypasses. The Marauder's map shows several hidden paths in and out of the school, and Fred and George Weasley used them constantly. But even that raises more questions than it answers. If underground paths can bypass the enchantments, doesn't that make Hogwarts vulnerable? Why bother with the no apparition rule at all if there are ways around it? Moreover, the use of portkeys is inconsistently applied. In Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr. turns the Triwizard Cup into a portkey without detection. In Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore creates portkeys to transport Harry and others. Portkeys are a regulated and complex form of magical travel, but are they also blocked by Hogwarts's defences? That is unclear. During the battle, no one uses a portkey to get in or out. Perhaps it's because they're banned, or perhaps it's because they don't work inside Hogwarts, but we are never told. In the heat of battle, logic often bends to storytelling. Rowling's writing excels in emotion and character arcs, sometimes at the expense of strict world-building rules. The logistics of battle, how reinforcements arrive, how supplies are transported, how communication happens, are left in the background. We focus instead on Harry, on Snape's memories, on the resurrection stone in the Forbidden Forest. But the silence around magical travel is hard to ignore. If characters could indeed apparate into Hogwarts, the whole shape of the battle would shift. A telling moment occurs when Percy Weasley arrives at the castle. He is said to appear through the tunnel with Aberforth's help, but no scene describes his journey. No line of dialogue clarifies whether he walked, apparated to Hogsmeade, or found another route. The narrative simply moves on, focusing on his reconciliation with the family. Again, the logistics are brushed aside. One of the most convincing suggestions is that the anti-apparition enchantments were deliberately weakened or temporarily lifted. But if so, who performed this? McGonagall? Flitwick? These are powerful witches and wizards, but their actions are not described. There is no scene of ritual or spellwork that shows the change. Such a moment would have been narratively powerful. Minerva standing at the tower, lowering ancient protections with trembling hands, inviting allies but risking danger. Yet it is never shown. The inconsistency becomes sharper when compared to earlier books. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius Black cannot enter Hogwarts without triggering alarms. Dementors are stationed around the perimeter. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore and Harry fly to the astronomy tower rather than apparate directly to safety. But in Deathly Hallows, people just appear. The absence of explanation is louder than words. Even Snape, who as headmaster should understand the castle's every magical barrier, uses traditional means to leave the school when Voldemort summons him. He doesn't vanish from his office, he walks. This suggests the protections were still active during his tenure. Yet mere hours later, people seem to come and go freely. Hogwarts's defences are central to its mythos. They are part of what makes it a sanctuary, a place beyond reach. The idea that you cannot simply apparate in or out is not a detail, it is a pillar of the school's identity. To bend that rule without showing it bend undermines the integrity of the magical world. The castle stands because it is protected. If those protections vanish conveniently, the stakes are diluted. And still, within the chaos, magic thrives on paradox. Perhaps the enchantments of Hogwarts are like the castle itself. Alive, aware, choosing who to let in. Perhaps the ancient spells respond to loyalty, to need, to bravery. Maybe, when the cause is just, the gates open not with spellwork, but with faith. It's poetic, it's satisfying, but it's also unspoken. In the end, we are left with a contradiction. The magical laws that govern Hogwarts seem to change when it suits the battle. Apparition, so tightly forbidden, happens quietly in the background. Portkeys vanish from the narrative. The logistics of war dissolve into metaphor. And readers who have followed these rules for 7 books are asked not to notice. This ambiguity lingers like the mist after a spell. Was the rule ever real, or was it a story Hogwarts told to stay safe? Was Dumbledore the only one who could break it, or did the war, in its urgency, teach the castle to bend? The answer, like magic itself, remains just out of reach. Number 25. How could Voldemort not know that Harry was a horcrux? In the wreckage of the Potter cottage in Godric's Hollow, a part of Lord Voldemort's soul drifted aimlessly. Its master's body had just been destroyed by his own killing curse, rebounding from the infant Harry Potter. That fragment, torn loose from the whole by a violent act of murder and the deep instability of a soul, already damaged by prior horcrux creation, latched onto the only living thing in the room, the boy who lived. What occurred in that moment remains one of the strangest paradoxes in the wizarding world. Voldemort, the foremost authority on soul magic and horcruxes, the most paranoid of wizards, never knew that a piece of his soul had embedded itself into a child. This oversight stands in striking contrast to everything Voldemort had shown himself to be. Horcrux creation, as described by Horace Slughorn in his Tampered Memory, required deliberate intent, a ritual, and a murder to fracture the soul. "It's the most evil of magical inventions," Slughorn whispered, "to split the soul and hide part of it in an object, so that even if one's body is attacked or destroyed, one cannot die." When Voldemort asked him if it would be possible to make 7, Slughorn was horrified. Yet Voldemort succeeded. He created horcruxes out of a diary, a locket, a ring, a cup, a diadem, and even his snake, Nagini. Every creation required preparation and control. So how could the 7th, Harry, be an accident? The diary of Tom Riddle, as revealed in Chamber of Secrets, was capable of possessing Ginny Weasley and forcing her to open the chamber. The locket was defended by curses and despair. The ring had been hexed so severely it nearly killed Dumbledore. Each horcrux contained not just a piece of Voldemort's soul, but a fierce protective will. Harry, on the other hand, experienced no such invasion of his personality. His scar hurt. He dreamed of Voldemort's mind, but he was never possessed in the way Ginny had been. Why not? The answer lies perhaps in the nature of the creation. Voldemort did not intend to make a horcrux that night. He had prepared no ritual. He had not selected a vessel. His soul was unstable, already fractured 6 times. When he attempted to kill Harry, the ancient magic of Lily's sacrificial protection turned his curse back upon himself. His body was destroyed, and in that moment of utter disintegration, a soul fragment torn loose in chaos sought refuge. Harry's proximity and the fact that he was the object of the curse made him the perfect receptacle. But without intent, could such a horcrux even be real? Was Harry's status as a horcrux valid in the magical sense? Dumbledore thought so. In Deathly Hallows, he explained, "You were the 7th horcrux, Harry, the horcrux he never meant to make." But Dumbledore also made clear that this was not a typical horcrux. You were the accidental horcrux he never knew. How could Voldemort not know? He was aware of the fragment inside the diary. He sent it to Hogwarts to reopen the chamber. He could sense the soul inside the ring and the locket. So why not the one inside Harry? One theory lies in Voldemort's belief system. He considered love a weakness, death a failure, and souls merely tools to be used. His ignorance of love magic caused his downfall once, but it also blinded him to the true nature of what occurred in Godric's Hollow. The ancient sacrificial protection that Lily Potter used created a magical barrier Voldemort had never encountered. When he was torn from his body, he believed he had simply been ripped from life, not that his soul had fragmented again. He fled as a wraith, clinging to existence through parasitic survival. He never looked back at that moment as a failed horcrux creation because in his mind he never meant to make one. Even so, shouldn't he have felt the connection? Harry felt it acutely. From the age of 11, Harry experienced Voldemort's emotions, rage, triumph, even joy. In Order of the Phoenix, after Arthur Weasley was attacked, Harry experienced the event through the eyes of the snake. He could see into Voldemort's thoughts, even hear his voice. "I saw it all," Harry said to Dumbledore, his thoughts, his plans. Yet Voldemort never experienced Harry's emotions in return. He never sensed the boy's presence within himself. Why? This asymmetry is deeply strange. When Harry was possessed by Voldemort briefly at the Ministry, the Dark Lord recoiled. "There is nothing worse than this," Voldemort screamed through Harry's body. "So much love, so much pain." The connection worked only one way. Harry could peer into Voldemort because he carried a piece of his soul, but Voldemort, having no understanding of love or sacrifice, could not penetrate Harry. Their bond, created through an act of love-deflected murder, operated beyond the usual rules of magical resonance. Dumbledore himself seemed surprised by the nature of this bond. He admitted, after Sirius's death, that he had delayed telling Harry everything out of fear. "I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth," he said. But in that same conversation, he added, "Voldemort himself created his worst enemy, just as tyrants everywhere do." It is perhaps telling that Dumbledore never said Voldemort knew about the horcrux within Harry. Instead, he referred to it as an accident Voldemort couldn't conceive of because Voldemort couldn't comprehend that his actions had consequences he hadn't planned. There is also the possibility that Voldemort's soul was too fragmented for him to detect the presence of another fragment. By the time he attacked the Potters, he had already made 6 horcruxes. His soul was stretched thin. Perhaps it was like trying to hear a whisper in a storm. He was so unstable, so scattered, that he couldn't feel the final shard embedded in a human boy. It's worth noting that in Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore says, he never knew he had made a seventh horcrux. He never knew he had transferred a part of his own soul into you. Not only did he not know, he had no way to know. But that raises another issue. When Voldemort returned to corporeal form in Goblet of Fire, he used Harry's blood to do it. He took it willingly, specifically because he believed it would allow him to bypass the ancient protection that Lily had cast. Yet even then, using Harry's own blood, he didn't sense the soul connection. Did the ritual not trigger any kind of magical response? Could a dark ritual that created a body from bone, blood, and flesh not cause magical dissonance if the body's source contained a soul piece already his? The absence of magical reaction is perhaps the greatest inconsistency. In other horcruxes, proximity caused pain or influence. The locket, for example, made Ron violent and jealous. The diary possessed Ginny. The ring nearly killed Dumbledore. But Harry carried his soul fragment for years and remained largely untouched, save for the occasional scar pain and dream. This can only be explained by the nature of Harry himself. He was not an object. He had his own soul, his own agency. Unlike an inanimate horcrux, Harry resisted the dark influence through sheer will, and perhaps because the fragment was dormant, unaware of itself. Even when Voldemort began to inhabit Nagini with parts of his soul, he remained unaware that he had exceeded the magical number of 7. He believed Nagini was his final horcrux. When he discovered one of his horcruxes had been destroyed, the diary, he was furious. But he still did not realize the full count was off. He never suspected Harry. "He has pushed his soul to the limit," Dumbledore told Harry, "and yet he does not realize the last piece is inside you." That statement reveals everything. Voldemort never counted, never checked. He acted from a place of obsession, not clarity. If anything, Voldemort's greatest blind spot was his own arrogance. He believed he had mastery over death. He believed he controlled every part of his existence, but he failed to account for randomness, for chaos, and for magic, older and more mysterious than his own. The accident of Harry's horcrux was born from such chaos. In Deathly Hallows, when Voldemort uses the Elder Wand against Harry in the forest, he thinks he has finally conquered fate. But instead, he destroys the piece of soul within Harry. And even then, he doesn't realize it. Only in the final duel at Hogwarts does Voldemort begin to sense something is wrong. "Why doesn't it work for me, Severus?" he demands. "The wand, it's not performing properly." He begins to suspect betrayal, not magical imbalance. He doesn't realize that the wand knows Harry is its master. He doesn't know that the soul piece has been destroyed. Even as he dies, Voldemort never fully comprehends the depth of his mistake. Ultimately, this is what makes the tragedy of Voldemort so poetic. He was undone not by power, but by ignorance. He could not feel love, so he could not understand its magic. He believed he understood death, but knew only how to flee from it. He believed horcruxes made him immortal, but he didn't even know how many he had made. He failed to see Harry not as a horcrux, but as a living, breathing human being capable of choosing sacrifice. Perhaps the most telling moment comes in King's Cross, when Harry meets the echo of Dumbledore. "He took your blood believing it would strengthen him," Dumbledore says. "He took into his body a tiny part of the enchantment your mother laid upon you." Voldemort carried a bit of Lily's protection within him, and still he never knew. He lived and died in ignorance. Thus, the mystery of the unknown horcrux isn't a plot hole, it is the heart of the story. Voldemort didn't know because he couldn't know. His soul was damaged, his empathy non-existent, and his understanding of love fatally flawed. What he thought made him invincible was precisely what blinded him to the truth. The boy he marked for death was the one who carried his doom inside him all along.